Here in the third block of the Cultural Hall, this is going to be the heavier news. Okay, do we have to talk about that? Do you guys always have to talk about that kind of stuff? Well, no, we don't have to. We choose to, and for good reason. I think it's important to know what is going on in and around the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with some bad actors, with things that we should be on the lookout for. Things that perhaps we have no control over, but could very easily happen to us, and how would we react? And I think it's just important to know. So that's what these articles of news are. It's the heavier articles of news, and I'm joined by Annette Luthi-Lyon. Thank you for drawing the short matchstick and doing the heavier news, Annette.
Happy to be here.
She says, happy to be. I wish I would have done the happier news.
No, well, I tend to be the dark one anyway, so we're good.
Come on now.
Well, no, like at Thanksgiving dinner, my brother-in-law looks at me and he goes, "So, what are your thoughts about Tim Ballard?" And I was like, "Oh, dude,
at this table,
how
right
far
now?
down the rabbit hole do you want me to go on that one?" He knows.
Yeah.
I mean, I am the dark person. It's good.
Well, then in that case, I'm glad to have you as we talk about it. This first one, just crummy, terrible, but not necessarily a bad actor or something, a Mormon behaving badly. There was a fire in Chevy Chase, Maryland, at a church, an LDS church, a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints there on Western Avenue. And I immediately thought, well, wait a minute. Why is it called Chevy Chase, Maryland? Obviously, I immediately went to the actor Chevy Chase, whose name, by the way, not birth given, Chevy Chase. You probably knew that.
I don't remember what his real name was, but
his
yeah.
name is
For those who are not of Gen X,
yeah,
you might know him. Was it from Community? Is that what he was on most recently?
Yeah, Community. His breakout came. He was the original Weekend Update segment on the first season of Saturday Night Live. Certainly this time of year, people will recognize him as Clark Griswold. His birth given name, Cornelius Crane Chase. But here's what I found out about why it's called a Chevy Chase, Maryland. So its name goes back to chases or hunting grounds in the Cheviot Hills. So it's the Chevy or Cheviot Hills, the Chevy Chase. So it's a hunting ground in Maryland, and that's why it's called the Chevy Chase Chapel in Maryland, because that's the place where this particular chapel was. Anyway, all to say, fire burned $10 million worth of damage to this particular chapel. Completely, I shouldn't say completely destroyed. They have not said whether or not they're going to try and rebuild it. It is for this particular community and for the church. And there's a great article, you can find the link in the show notes, where it talks about the history for this particular community with this chapel. Talks about how, built nearly 80 years ago, that the singing Mormon mothers. Have you ever heard of this phenomenon
No.
with the church in it? So they were sometimes called the Relief Society's singing mothers. They would go, every ward or every stake sort of had this group of women that would sing, and then every year or every couple years they would go to New York and put on a concert. Similar to like how back in the day we used to do road shows at a ward level, and then they would compete at a stake level, and then they would go region. They would do those kind of things that involved all the membership of the church. And then they also had, for the young men, they used to have basketball tournaments. And people probably don't even remember this. You'd have the competition on this stake level that then went to region. And then I think every year or every other year, or maybe every 4 years, like the Olympics, all the winningest teams would converge on Salt Lake, like we do now with the competitive sports for our teenage kids that we can't afford, but we force them into because one day they're going to be an NBA basketball player. They would do that within the church in the 60s and 70s for these massive basketball competitions. So the story about this particular chapel, twofold. One, wow, we used to do all these things that we don't do anymore. Two, the fire started, they think, in the attic of this particular chapel. Have not determined whether or not it was arson, though it looks like it is not, in fact, arson, caused for some other reason. The particular ward from the Chevy Chase building displaced, and on Thanksgiving, a neighboring ward in the Washington northwest part of DC said, "Hey, you guys have been through a lot. We're opening the doors to our church. Why don't you guys come and spend some Thanksgiving time with us?" Which I think is super cool.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, we don't do that kind of stuff in Utah. We sort of stick stuff with our families. We don't think of our churches, our family, nearly as much in the Intermountain West as people do elsewhere. But this is the whole ward gets together, and obviously not the whole ward, but a majority of the ward, a good portion of the ward gets together. Everyone brings a thing. You get together, you have a big meal, and they said, "Hey, ward that's now displaced, why don't you come over and have some food and take a load off, and we'll take care of you with all that you guys have been through." So several aspects of this thing, not the least of which is the $10 million at least of damage to this particular building, but just sad. The photos, crazy. It's 2-alarm fire, which if people don't know about how alarm fires work, it's like an escalating degree. It's like a category 5 storm is worse than a category 1 storm. So a 2-alarm fire is more. They had like 100 firefighters. A couple of firefighters had things fall towards them or at them and were mildly injured within it. Luckily, no one died or was seriously injured in the fire at all. No congregants or anything like that, but just a devastating fire for the community, for that particular church building, for the history of the church there, and sad.
It is. That's very sad.
Do you, is your particular church that you worship in, is it a newer church or older church?
My current one is new. Yeah.
Okay.
I grew up in an older one though.
So you sort of get kind of the feeling of like because like my ward, for example, at the time that my ward was built, or right around the time that my ward was built, my grandfather was the bishop of this particular ward. And it was back in the time where they had to say, Sister Lion, how much can you donate to the building of this building? And so it would be, I mean, any sort of fire or destruction or anything like that is a tragedy. It would be a particular tragedy for my community here in Taylorsville for something to happen to our chapel, because a lot of the people that still worship there are people that either as kids or in their early adult years sacrificed to have a building so close.
That's and older buildings actually often have cool architecture features as well. Like the one my husband grew up attending had like a gun range in the basement. Just really wild stuff. It was like an ADA nightmare with stairs in weird places and stuff, but it was cool at the time. They've since torn it down and replaced it. But
interesting. Cool stuff. The gun range. I wonder if that was something that the church was like, yeah, we're cool with that, or if like people in the ward were like, listen, if we're paying for it, it's going to have some features that we want. Let's get a bowling alley in there. Let's get a gun range.
Exactly.
Now you had a news story or two you wanted to share. Maybe not necessarily as heavy, which is fine.
Yeah, I mentioned Tim Ballard already, but just thought may as well update on some of the latest things. Just a couple of days ago, we got a video of the 5 women who were anonymous who are suing him. They come out and made statements on video with their own names and read statements. And it's very powerful. It's about 20 minutes long, and it's heartbreaking to watch, but it's very much corroborating each other's stories. It's disturbing. One of the 5 is a former Marine, and her story was published in Vice several days before the video came out. And she said, yes, that story was about me. And in that story, the article, it's one of those things where over and over she had those little red flags of, this doesn't seem right. Why are there no more requirements for this training than writing a letter? This seems odd. This seems unprofessional, but like everybody else is okay with it. So Tim must be okay. But again, all these red flags in hindsight. And then in one of these trainings, this dude landed on her face and broke her orbital bone. She now has problems with vision for the rest of her life now, and she has a titanium plate in her face. And when it happened, Tim said, well, we can't call an ambulance. because he didn't want Operation Underground Railroad to be connected to her accident. I mean, it was just, it's disturbing, but it's, again, it's good information to come forward and to come to light. And anyone who doubted that there were women who had real stories, you see them, you see their faces and their pain. It's sad, but real.
And as I understand, one of the women is still anonymous because there were 6 that made accusations and only the 5 have come forth
Went
with
public.
with their names in that. And that's, like you say, I mean, there have been a lot of people that are like, you innocent until proven guilty. Okay.
That's in court.
Well,
period.
Yeah, I know, but I try and just be like, I'm not trying to give the guy any sort of benefit of the doubt. I know certainly if I was accused of things and I didn't feel like it, I would say, hey, I didn't do this. So I guess we have to leave even just a little bit of space of like, hey, it could just be, I don't think it is, but it could just be this whole thing, but absolutely just terrible as you hear these women's stories, see the pain, hear the pain in their voices as they talk about what occurred. But to the one person who's like, hey, man, innocent until, okay, yeah, all right, we'll give you that space. Yes, all of these things, I suppose, could be, no, there's something to all of this, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire, all the things. How was the rest of your Thanksgiving dinner when you started talking about Tim Ballard? Did that end up tasting as good?
It was it was interesting because there were a couple of people who knew very little or thought it was all made up. And when I was able to drop a lot of actual sources and whatnot, they went, oh, and they started seeing that this wasn't just like a hit situation.
Sure.
But then other things came out. The Daybell case was brought up, and I had a sibling go, the what? And then my brother was like, you don't know that case, how can you not know? And so he joined me and we went off a little bit on some of that. Anyway, it was good. It was, I like I said, I tried to rein myself in a bit because I can go off for hours, and I didn't.
Nice. Did you guys talk about what you were
Credit
grateful
to me
for too, or just like people who?
It was fun. We had a good Thanksgiving overall.
Good food and all the things.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, let's shift then, as we are in the heavier side of the news of this stuff. I'm not really sure where I want to go with all this. How about I thought this was interesting. This from an exclusive in People magazine. A lot of different reactions in the comment section on this about David Archuleta. He says that his Mormon friends are cold to him 1 year after leaving the church. He says, quote, I feel like I'm in the stage where I'm learning to not have to apologize anymore to people for who I am. I'm now trying to find myself as an adult queer person and say, you know what? It's okay to be me. If that means I'm someone else from who I was maybe 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Goes on to reflect about how he feels like people just aren't comfortable with who he is. He says, as I step away more and more from the culture I grew up in and the mindset that I was raised to have, I'm learning to find myself more and more. He says that he went to a funeral. I thought that this was interesting because well known that he was good friends with M. Russell Ballard. He went to a funeral of one of the worldwide church leaders, according to People, obviously Elder Ballard. And said that it was weird to step into it, no longer being a part of it, and saying, you know what? It seems like everyone has moved on from me as well. I think it would be an interesting place. I don't know that it's people have moved on necessarily. I would hope not. I think that there's a part of it that in my heart hopes that like we always love everyone, always. Maybe that's altruistic and not realistic, just because of how people are. But I also think to me, say that I were at Elder Ballard's funeral, and say that I was friends with Elder Archuleta, to then say, hey, David, there would be a little bit of, I guess maybe it's sort of awkwardness, right? Not awkwardness like I didn't care about him as an individual, not awkwardness like I didn't want to know what was going on with his life, but like if I'm at a church thing and he knows that I'm a member of the church and I know he's not a member of the church, like, is it like, what do you sort of connect on? How's life? Great. Cool.
Do you bring up the elephant in the room?
Yeah.
Or not,
and maybe
yeah.
and because LDS people not known for really great uncomfortable conversations or confrontation, I bet most people just sort of avoid it, and I could see
Yep.
how that could be seen as cold. It would be my hope that people aren't like, not talking to him anymore, forget
Mhm.
that guy. But I could see that would occur. I hope it's more that it was just uncomfortable and people didn't know what to do, rather than people making the
And I hope it's
decisive
temporary, that
choice.
they'll come around and be like, I wasn't sure what to say, but hey, let's still be friends.
Yeah. That's why I always will say something, even when I undoubtedly will say the wrong thing. I lean into it because I don't ever want anyone to think anything else. I'm like, here we go. That was the wrong thing, huh? Yeah. But I sure am grateful I said something.
Yeah, I think to err on that side, I think is good. I remember one time a friend was going through a stillbirth
Oh,
situation, and
geez.
I remember being on the phone with her and saying, I don't even know what to say. And she goes, that's what I needed to hear, that you don't say, oh, he's in a better place, or oh, that you don't understand, but you care. And I was like, okay, good. Saying I had no clue what to say was better than, a platitude, I guess.
Yeah.
So I was grateful for that.
Yeah. We're just going to get darker and darker as far as this news goes. I'm not sure if you want to take another one of your stories.
I'll take one. This one's very short, so I'll go quick with it here.
Okay.
Shanna Gardner, who we've been following the case of Jared Brightigan, who was her ex-husband, that she is now charged with his murder, along with her now second husband and 2 other accomplices. She has replaced her attorney with a new one, and that's kind of a eyebrow raiser, because this guy was the attorney who got Casey Anthony acquitted.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So people are kind of raising their eyebrows at that one and going, that's interesting. And her family, being the Stampin' Up fortune, can afford that kind of lawyer. And if he can get Casey Anthony off, who knows what he can do with Shanna Gardner. So
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, you have definitely kept us updated as far as that goes. So continuing to follow that. This Mormon ex-scout leader, by the way, if there are younger kids' ears listening, this is where we get into the heavy stuff for a bit. So maybe press pause, come back to it. 47-year-old former Pennsylvania Boy Scout leader has been sentenced for sexually assaulting 2 young relatives for several years in Virginia. Sean Corey Gooden pleaded guilty in July after an extensive investigation revealed he sexually assaulted a relative when they were between the ages of 9 and 13 years old, multiple times over the course of 1997 to the year 2000. Gooden held the following positions until his arrest. In September 2022, he was bishop with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a member of the executive board for the New Birth of Freedom Boy Scouts organization. During the investigation, police discovered that Gooden sexually assaulted another young relative who was between the ages of 8 and 12 during their assault, which happened during the same time frame. The felony charges he pleaded guilty in Virginia were taking indecent liberties with children, aggravated sexual battery, forcible sodomy, 2 counts. He was sentenced in Prince William Circuit Court to serve at least 2.5 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation upon release. He is a registered sex offender now, according to the court documents, and this is not the end of Gooden's assault cases. He's also facing 19 charges regarding the rape of 3 children under the age of 13 in Berks County, Pennsylvania, according to records. Those offenses are dated April 21st of 2000. And you can, if as always, contact the police should you know about anything like this going on or have anything related to this case, or you can call the Scouts First helpline, which is 844-SCOUTS-1, and email contact scoutsfirst@scouting.org to report suspected abuse or inappropriate behavior. But just one of a couple of these kind of stories that we're going to talk about during this time. Comments from you, said Annette Luthi Lyon. Anything about that?
just horrible.
Yeah.
Just awful. I'm glad people are getting charged. People are speaking up, because it's not just our church problem. This is something that's, it seems like every Christian church seems to have this type of issue. And I think we're starting to address it on an institutional level, but obviously we have a long way to go, and I hope people are held accountable for what they've done. It's
Yeah.
tough.
And eyes wide open, I think, is probably the most reason why I share these things. Is so many times, and we've talked about it here in the Cultural Hall, in other things, in like affinity fraud and other things, as we go, no, there is no way that Annette, who I have spoken about Mormon things, for hours on end, she writes books that are wholesome and good. There is no way, and I'm not saying you do any of these things or anything, even
Better
adjacent
not.
to these things,
But
but
no.
if you started acting in a way that I go,
Mhm.
there is validity in thinking, okay, well, you know what? Just because they have the stamp of LDS or they have the whatever of this, that doesn't mean that they couldn't be
Yeah.
these other things.
I've been grateful that, like, I was a primary teacher for many, many years, and I was glad that every couple of years I had to take that online thing, the little training, which is not a big deal. It's a 20-minute little video to watch, and you answer questions just to confirm that, yes, I know the two deep leadership and what's appropriate, what's not. It's been great to see doors with windows being put into the chapels, so that classrooms are not, anyone can peek in at any time. I think some of those things, I think, are that we're making some good strides. Again, on an institutional level, we're not there yet, but it's steps in the right direction to protect kids down the road. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. It's
This one
ugly and
about
hard.
Brian Rogolino. Court records indicate that Brian Rogolino's bond was set at $250,000 to $125,000 per count after a Lee Circuit Judge Court, Robert Branning, has said that Rogolino, charged with one count of sexual battery on a child younger than 12 and one count of lewd and lascivious molestation. Jail records indicate that he remained in custody Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks after Branning set his bond. As part of the approval, Branning ordered additionally that Rogolino is required to wear a GPS monitor and stay at least 1,000 feet away from places where children congregate. And going on, police said that on February 10th, an out-of-state police agency contacted detectives to report that a victim came forward alleging a sex act from several years ago that happened in Cape Coral on January 18th. The victim disclosed to school staff that several years ago they were touched inappropriately by Rogolino of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The investigation claims Rogolino performed sex acts on the victim without her consent. Rogolino's next court date was not yet set. So, again, just another thing. And I think, I think it's human nature probably when these things come out, I instantly go, when was this? I look at the date. Is this the 80? And not that it makes it any less traumatic, terrible, anything like that, but I like to look at the date and go, is this now? And we need to like really be focused on the things that we need to continue to maybe be doing more. Was this in the past? It's all tragic. It's all traumatic. Your heart goes out to all the people that had to suffer at the hands of these people that did these things. So that's not that, but I look instantly for the date and go, is this today? Is this the past? If there's something from the past, have we done things that would make this harder to occur now, or do we need to continue to do more?
Exactly.
And again,
are the guardrails that are starting to be put in place, did they fail, or was this before the guardrails existed, or all of that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then sort of on the last little part of this, and then maybe we can do a little bit of a nicer, little lighter sort of thing. Cochise County judge threw out an attempt by two survivors of family sexual abuse to sue the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and two of its bishops for failing to report to police what they may have known of the incidents. This is, of course, of the story out of Arizona that we talked about. Superior Court Judge Timothy Dickerson said there is no evidence that church officials had independent knowledge of the abuse other than the confidential communications that they had with abuser Paul Adams. So Paul Adams, apparently within clergy privilege, said, hey, this is what I've done to my kids. And very egregious. You can read the articles. I'm not going to respout the things that he did. The judge said that Arizona laws that require such incidents to be reported, including by the clergy, specifically say that is overridden when the only source of that information is what was divulged to them in confession or similar conversation. So That is likely not going to be the last word in that particular case. There is likely to be an appeal of all the trial judges' rulings, and who knows where this ends up. But at least for the time being, what it says is, yeah, you know what? Listen, if this occurs and the only way that people know about it is through a confession with the bishop, whether that's an LDS bishop or otherwise, they do not have to report it to the police. And where this particular case gets a little bit messy is that the bishops called the helpline that the LDS Church offers and asked for advice, who, according to reports, told him to not report it to the police, or encouraged him to follow the laws of Arizona, which said he did not, in fact, have to share that with the police. So it's not how I would do it.
Exactly.
I think it's difficult because on the one hand, like, you hear so much about like the clergy and the the confidentiality, right? But on the other hand, like, I just feel like that, in an effort to be so devoted to one side, we miss the point of the other side. Meaning, if we can prevent, like, there has to be like a stop in some of these things. Like, if we know that someone does A, then B doesn't apply, because we can't have C, which is the children being abused continuously for a long time, right? Like, yes, okay, the guy, he chatted with someone who isn't his wife and they were inappropriate in their conversation. I don't know, maybe that's okay, maybe it's not. Maybe there's someone who's been cheated on that's like, that absolutely should be reported, whatever. I don't know where the line is necessarily. But the idea that these people knew, could have reported and prevented further abuse to occur is so hard for me to be like, yeah, keep it to yourself. Law says keep it to yourself unless you can verify it other ways. I don't understand that. If there's someone who does understand that better than me, contact theculturalhall.com. I would love to have that discussion.
I know that I've seen several people deal with, the argument that, well, if they've repented and we should forgive and blah, blah, blah. But then oftentimes it'll even be the person who they abused that is expected to be okay with being in their presence. And it's like, it's almost, I almost think of it, if someone is a pedophile, it's almost like being an alcoholic, where it's, you can forgive them from what they've done, but don't give them alcohol.
Right.
Don't put them in the position where they could reoffend. We can forgive them, we can love them, but don't expect them to be near their victim or give them new victim opportunities. And it's okay if the victim hasn't forgiven them yet. That does not change the atonement at all. They have their own journey and they've been wounded. So come on, I don't know. I've seen that too many times and it frustrates me. But
I guess there's some part of the atonement, or like the paying the price, I guess, that makes me feel like if you broke the law, and again, this is another scale of where I don't know where you necessarily right, but like, I stole $1 million, right? I go to the bishop and I say, hey, I stole $1 million. I feel really bad about it. I promise I'm not going to do it again. Let's say I even repay the people $1 million. I still have done something illegal.
mm-hmm.
And to me, I guess in my mind, and I don't know where the cutoff on something like this is I feel like some part of it is like the to face the punishment of the law is part of the punishment for the thing which you've done. And
yes,
I don't think it's that black and white, because I can think of several things that I have done that are illegal that I have never, I speed, right? I drive faster than I should, or I talk on my cell phone, right? There's some sort of things like that those things are illegal. And so where do I cut that off? In order for me to truly be forgiven, do I need to pay a ticket or take the class that's the thing? Like, I'm sure there's some sort of cutoff, but there does seem on some of these serious, more egregious things that it's like, no, I think part of it is the law of the land, or the punishment of man, that goes along with the I don't know, the godly punishment or the godly sorrow, in order to have complete redemption from it.
agreed.
Yeah.
You want a light palate cleanser to finish things
Give me
up?
a light. Well, we're not done yet, but
We're not done yet.
give me a light
Okay.
palate cleanser, would you please?
Okay, so this is there is a children's or a youth choir.
Okay.
It's called the Rise Up Children's Choir, and it is founded by a whole slew of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I looked them all up, and from what I could tell, every one of them is a member.
But are they Mormon royalty? That's the term I like to throw around now.
Mormon royalty? No,
Mormon
I would say
royalty.
you'd probably recognize a lot of them from theater and
Okay.
that kind of thing.
So no,
But
not royalty.
what was that?
So no, not royalty. Sorry.
So
go
no.
ahead.
They recently did a cover of one of the Killers songs, and of course the Killers with Brandon Flowers, Brother Flowers, past guest of the Cultural Hall. At one point it was the joke that he was a future guest because Richie was going to get him in, and he since has.
Boom.
But they did a cover of the Killers song, All These Things That I've Done. So, and it's fun. It's a pretty good, this is a pretty good choir. It's kind of impressive. And my other fun fact, aside from it being, all Latter-day Saint adjacent, is that my niece is in it. Okay. And she's actually listed in the credits, and she has a couple of solos. If you look at her, she's got if you watch, there's a YouTube video we will include in the show notes. She's got an orange sweater on. Looks nothing like me because her mother is beautifully ethnic and I am very much Scandinavian. But yeah, Rebecca Lyon is credited in there, and that's my niece.
Way to go, awesome. Rebecca.
So yeah, it's a great video and a great cover anyway, and the choir does good stuff.
I appreciate that palate cleanser. Let's get that palate dirty again. Here we go. How about this particular story? There is another lawsuit against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, alleging that the church uses tithing contributions from its members for-profit issues. The thing that's interesting, this is a couple weeks old now at this point, but we haven't shared it here in the Cultural Hall. It's 3 members of the church, active members of the church, who have said, hey, listen, we think that, there was a particular talk in the time of Gordon B. Hinckley around City Creek, where the choice of his words make us think that the money that we think we are contributing for tithing, that is for the care of members of the church, is being used as part of the investment arm of the church. And we've got an issue with that, and we would like the church to be more transparent about it. It's interesting. These are not the whistleblowers that have been reported before. These are like that case that was filed by Huntsman. The 3 men, they lean on the allegations of the whistleblower, David Nielsen. They bring into question Ensign Peak and how they've spent funds only twice in its 26-year history, according to both lawsuits. In 2009, they spent $600 million to bail out a failing church-owned for-profit life insurance company, and then the mall near Temple Square, the only 2 times that money has been spent. They would like to see more transparency about it, and they aren't seeking to get their tithing money back. They're just seeking to go, hey, where is this money being used? We'd like a little more information, please, and thank you. So interesting to see that has been, that suit has been filed. Of course, anyone can sue anyone about anything, so I recognize those sort of retaliations to stories like this, but it is interesting to note that I can't imagine in a lot of these cases that there are people that are willing to put their financial and or their social standing out on the line if they don't in some way feel principled to what they're doing, whether it is that they feel like the church acted incorrectly or they just want more transparency as far as what the church is doing. I think that there is at least some validity to those individuals as to why they're doing what they're doing. And, it also then raises the question, if you found out tomorrow all the tithing money that you've been, donating your entire life, whatever that amount has been, is going to make the church more wealthy, to grow more and more money, is that a big deal to you? Is that no deal to you? Do you care that that's the thing? Is the principle just that you gave the tithe to the church, or where do you reside with that? And I think that's a significant personal question. If they were using these funds as they deem incorrectly, Like, do you feel like the church should be taxed? Do you feel like, that all the things with it? Where do you kind of land? Where do you reside if one of these lawsuits ends up going through? No comment, Annette?
No,
No comment?
it's. I feel like we've kind of covered some of this. I mean, it's more visibility, transparency would be great. I understand why we haven't gotten it. I don't know.
Yeah, to me, I guess I don't. To me, it feels like I get underestimated. If the church came out tomorrow and they said, "Hey, here's the deal: in a year we make $2 billion on tithing," like right, or 1 billion, half a billion, doesn't matter. Numbers are relevant. And they say, and we spend. So let's use the idea of 1 billion, right? Let's say every year we get $1 billion in tithing, and the church spends 500 million to help people. And then we invest the 500 million and we buy things. Like, we're going to talk about a story in a minute about how the church recently is now the largest landowner in Nebraska. Like they are in 7 or 11 other states, right? Buying huge tracts of land. Thank you for the nod to that movie, those that got it. Otherwise, let's move on. So then, let's say that we found that out, right? They're doing that and they're trying to become more wealthy, and they're trying to become more wealthy, and they're trying to become more wealthy. Does that matter to me as a church member? Well, I guess it matters to me. Do I still feel like God has asked me to pay tithing to his church? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So would I probably do it still? Yeah, I probably would still. But I think and at least in sort of side conversations on some of these things where it goes, there was that documentary that was done earlier this year or late last year where one of the people in the church said, "Hey, you know what? One of our issues that we have is we feel like if members of the church are aware of how much money we have, we think they'll stop giving." And I think that there's some validity to that. I think that there are some people who will go, "How many billions does the Lord's church need? I could really stand to do this." But I don't know that those are people that are like, "I believe in the principle of tithing,
right,
as God asked me to do it." You know what I'm saying? So I feel sort of underestimated, right? I'd still probably do.
Yeah, I don't pay tithing because I think the church needs it. I pay
Right.
tithing because I covenanted to do these things, and therefore I pay tithing. So yeah, I feel like if we had all kinds of transparency, we would have people arguing over, well, you shouldn't be leasing this kind of car for the general authorities. It should be this kind of car.
Sure.
Why are we doing this? It's why are you spending money? We would have a different kind of microscope. So again, where do you draw the line? There has to be a line someplace. I don't know. I don't know where that would be. Would I like to know more? Sure. Do I have the right to it? I don't know. Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe I guess my thought is, I mean, I'd like to know, and I think about things like, we live in a day and an age where I think for some people to have employment that like sustains their family. This is tangential, so get ready, pack a bag real quick. But like, if every ward building were to hire a facilities manager and that person has to do the outside and do the inside, and now I don't have to clean anymore, but that person gets a job with benefits and a median salary, that seems like a pretty great use of church's money for each of the buildings. Now, is it an expense? Sure. Do we have it? Oh, I don't know. Is it sustainable on the thousands of chapels that we have? I don't know, right? I don't know all those things. But to me, I start to think of some of those things and go, there could be some sort of limit as to like, not that we don't pay tithing anymore, but that we start to do some other things with the money. Right. Yeah. To sort of help.
I could totally get on board with that. Like even how you mentioned, sometimes, we'll end up with a bishop. This is several weeks ago, we talked about it, that who might be really struggling to serve as bishop and provide for his family. What if there was not a salary, but something to help him, an allowance of some sort to help him support his family and attend to the flock as well?
Yeah. It'd be huge.
That kind of thing. So yeah,
it's huge. And how do we do that? I don't know. And what's the solution? I'm not sure. And how
we ask the questions. We don't answer them.
But I do think that could be kind of a cool thing, right? It's no different than a bishop's storehouse. It's not like he's like, bring me all the money so that I can be a rich bishop and all this stuff. But it is like, hey, you know what? I have something valuable to offer to this flock. And the only way that I can do this is with added contributions for the church. And I think that individual and those individuals in that particular ward's life would be blessed because of that kind of service. Because it's not the lawyer. It's not the CEO of said organization. It's someone with a willingness to serve that just needs a little bit of help. I don't know. Long tangent. Side tangent. We are, in fact, the largest landowner now of the state of Nebraska. That's just come over in the last 4 or 5 years. Obviously, you have within Nebraska, the church owned a considerable amount of land already around winter quarters, but has now bought several other parts of land up to the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres now of the state of Nebraska.
If memory serves, I think winter quarters is across the border in Iowa, so that might not even count toward that number.
Well, so according to this article, which you can find in the show notes, the Winter Quarters Nebraska Temple is in Omaha. According to this.
Winter Quarters Memorial Site is not.
Okay, maybe that's the difference. So the temple in Omaha, the memorial site in Iowa.
It's like literally like across the river. It's like you can probably see one from the other, but
like, hello over there. Yes, hi, we are Nebraska.
Exactly.
Hello, we are Iowa. Good to see you. Yeah, so worth noting that. We wane on this, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to share this story. Do you have anything else that you're like, oh man, we've got to talk about this before we close this out?
Nothing. I have some things we could talk about, but nothing that's burning and urgent. So no.
Okay. So I think that we go here. This is interesting. And man, if you want to take the adventure down like what the road, go ahead and find this this story in the show notes. The headline is this couple, and this is so clickbaity, I love it. This couple found out they were cousins and they got married anyway, is the title of this particular one. So, in what feels like a deleted scene from The Crown, a woman took to social media to tell the world that she chose to marry her boyfriend, who is also her cousin. Now, Kenna, who goes by Kenna Hags on TikTok, decided to crack open the popular social media app in order to reveal a pretty intense secret. She married her cousin, and it was not a mistake. While clutching a can of what appears to be a terrifying brand of seltzer, Kenna and her husband gleefully embrace behind text explaining how much they relate to each other. In fact, hint, it's too much. The caption reads, just Utah things. And I hate to perpetuate a stereotype about Mormons in that state, but it seems as if Kenna is already going to do that. Before anyone asks, she and her husband are definitely members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. According to the Daily Mail in a November 2023 piece about the Mormon Church. Okay, that's a side thing. So now there is the termed phrase, a husband, a cousin who is also your husband. So if you are cousins with your husband, now we have a term for it. A term I
am not a fan of that new word. And I'm a word person, as you know. Yeah, I like new words now.
You're not a fan of husband, huh?
Well, and if I recall correctly, Utah law does not allow first cousins to marry unless they are over
65.
65 or they are both infertile. So where do they fall on that one? Or are they second cousins or something?
So interesting that you would ask, and I appreciate the curious mind of which you have. It is why we are friends and why we both decide to do these news articles for the Cultural Hall. I shared this particular article on the Cultural Hall Facebook page, where we show share most of the articles that we ultimately will end up talking about in articles of news. And we had a response. I'm scrolling now, stalling to try and find it. A response about how closely related they likely could be. And so now let me go to those comments. Robert Mortensen, who funnily enough is actually a cousin of mine, he says that he did some research because he's sort of nerdy about the family history. He says, I'm pretty sure that they're not first or second cousins. More likely, they're much more distant cousins, and this is clickbait, which is much ado about nothing. So then he goes on, because I have a family tree of nearly 100,000 people and I enjoy connecting my DNA cousins within 5 generations, I figured I'd do some internet sleuthing on our mystery couple in this article. Well, he says, I've created complete family trees for both of them going back 6 generations, and there are no common ancestors within 6 generations on these family trees.
Heavens.
I found only one common surname, but they aren't related between the trees. I did find that Eli Hagemeyer, the alleged husband, is the grandson of the wonderful Ed Pinniger. Eli and McKenna's cousin connection must be greater than 5th cousins. So again, much ado about nothing, but well done by them creating clickbait and controversy for the news outlets to pick up. Now, worth it for the term husband, I say, because I like it. I know you are rejecting the term.
It gives me the willies. As long as you're talking 6th or 7th times removed or something. That's a different. And that's most people in Utah. If you have a pioneer ancestry and you're in Utah, you're related. Period.
Yeah, but I like the shock value of this is my husband.
Like, you're what now?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Where does that come from? Well, he's my cousin and also my husband. I'm sorry, what? But it is interesting, and this is not the focus of the article, not necessarily the focus of the article. The cousin part is the big thrust of it. But I don't even know how to frame this because I don't want to put any sort of like everybody gets to do their own marriage their own way. But like she'll say things like her husband is not allowed in the kitchen. Like only she does the cooking. He works and she spends his money. Like there's some weird aside from the husband part of this whole thing.
There's some June Cleaver-ish things going on.
Yeah, there's some very like strange, and everyone gets to do their marriage however it works, right? I don't have it figured out. Trust me, being married to me 24/7 is a chore for my wife. Apologies, sweet Jess. But like there's some stuff that I'm just like, is this all played up for social media? I hope so. Because it's some weird like he doesn't allow me to work kind of stuff. And they don't, I guess in my mind, I picture the kind of person, what that person would look like who would say something like that. And they don't look like that. And I don't think anyone should ever say that about another person like that. There seems like some control and some manipulation. I don't know. But
I remember knowing a girl once who she and her husband got married and dealt with infertility for years. And their Christmas letter literally said she quit her job so she can stay home because that's where she belongs. And I was like, wait, what now? You have no children. What? Yeah. What? Ha. No. Yeah. Like, I bristled at that one. That seemed so sick and wrong, but yeah.
So we'll end it on this. After Robert does the full report onto whether or not these people are actually cousins and it's the husband, he says, ultimately, they're not that related. To which I asked him, cousin, should we get married then? And yet I have no response from my husband, Robert Mortensen. We'll see. I don't think he listens to the Cultural Hall, but if he does, the offer's there, Robert. You could be my husband. That's a whole different kind of TikTok when we share something like that.
And then we're also getting into bigamy at that point.
Yeah, right. And then, then they're technically, though, cousin and non-romantic interested, it's still technically a homosexual marriage. And then we face church discipline as far as all that goes, and on and on and on. The TikToks would have their day. Annette, I hope that this episode has nourished and strengthened your body.
I hope that if you could not listen this week, that you'll be healthy and will be able to listen next week.
And that when the time comes, you will be able to travel home in safety. In the meantime, we will be saving a seat for you
on the back row
of
the Cultural
Hall.